This is the VTOMAN FlashSpeed 1500 portable power station. That's 1500 watts. At the time of recording this video, this is only $799. Seeing the specs and the price that they're charging for it really piqued my interest. To be honest, I wasn't really sure it was going to live up to the specs that it claims, but here we are. Color me impressed. Let's talk about it. First of all, this thing has lithium iron phosphate and it can handle up to 1500 watts with a 3000 watt peak. It can recharge from 0 to 100% in an hour. It has 3 AC outlets, 6 USB ports, and on top of all of that, it has a pretty good UPS system built right into it with pass-through voltage from the grid. And this is a big deal for me. I've said it before and I'll say it again. If you can take a power station, use it for camping and whatever extracurricular activities that you want to, but also be able to use it inside your home for backup power supply for critical items, that is a win all around. And a power station with the UPS feature is what makes that happen. Now, of course, this is kind of a big battery. I mean, it's 1500 watts worth of AC output, but it has a battery capacity of 1548 watt hours, and you can even expand it up to 3096 watt hours if you want to buy an extra battery for it. I don't have the extra battery for that, but that's still a great option to be able to extend your battery life with a feature built right into the power station. But the charging is what really impressed me, okay? It says 1500 watts worth of AC input, but during my testing, plugged into the wall, the AC charged at 1670 watts. So it already goes above and beyond its specs, which is kind of cool. That means they're not overestimating what the specs are, they're actually underestimating it. And I don't really see that very often. People like to inflate numbers. That means 0 to 100% in 1 hour. However, you can also do a 400 watt solar input and a 200 watt DC input, making this thing capable of being charged within 45 minutes. I mean, sure, most people are just going to plug this in and deal with 1 hour, but come on, that's kind of impressive. It's built in with a beefy BMS system to make sure the lithium iron phosphate batteries don't overheat, which by the way can feature up to 3000 cycles before you get down to that 80% of the original capacity. And the 1500 watt inverter in this thing is a pure sine wave inverter, which is going to make it great for computers, great for sensitive equipment, and because it has a pretty good UPS feature, it might actually be a pretty decent UPS for a computer. The thing that's a little confusing is that if you go on the Amazon page, part of the page says 20 millisecond switch time on the UPS, but the images say 10 millisecond. Now I ran some tests on it, and although I don't have the ability to actually measure 10 versus 20 milliseconds, but what I can say is that it was able to power a computer, have it unplugged from the wall, and not interrupt the computer. I even put some heavy resistive loads on it and a little light bulb, and it just barely flickered. So any half-decent computer with a decent power supply should be able to handle this switch time without any issues. Now, if you're really interested in solar input, this thing can handle up to 400 watts. That uses the Anderson input ports, that's 30 to 60 volts, which by the way, they also sent me a solar panel VS220, that's a 220 watt, 48 volt, 4.58 amp foldable portable solar panel. Aside from this just being a normal solar panel that can fold up, be portable, and deploy wherever you want to, at the end of the day, it's just kind of a regular solar panel and it's 220 watts. They do offer bigger options though. Of course, you're going to pay more for it, but if it's something you need, it's probably worth it. So the performance on this thing has done nothing but impress me. It surpassed all of my expectations. It went above and beyond all of the specs that I was given. It absolutely did not let me down on anything. But another great thing about this is that it has 12 output ports. That's 3 110 volt, which yes, it is 110. It doesn't get you up to 120 unless you're, powering from the grid and it's doing pass-through. You're only really going to notice something like that if you have super sensitive equipment or if you're running like a fan or a space heater, stuff like that. Those things react to lower voltages. Either way, they can handle 1500 watts or they can surge up to 3000 watts. I personally was able to get to 1700 watts for a while and I hit 1900 watts for a few seconds before it started to dip down. It has 4 USB Type A ports, 2 USB Type C ports. Type C ports, of course, being able to put out 100 watts, and I tested that. It definitely works. 2 standard DC 5521 output ports and 1 car cigarette lighter adapter port. Something to note here is I always want to test is that the DC is regulated above 12 volts. I run a draw test all the way up to 10 amps to see if I can get this thing to dip below 12 volts, and no matter what, it was not dipping below it. The regulated port at the lowest was 12.2 volts, at the highest was 12.7 volts. Now I'm pretty sure I mentioned pass-through charging before, but if you plug this thing into a wall, the voltage that you get from the grid or from your house or whatnot is going to be passed directly to whatever you have plugged into the power station, which means it bypasses the batteries, not going to add any wear and tear on it, and if the batteries need charged, it can also charge those batteries while providing power to whatever you have plugged into the device. And with that UPS feature, of course, if you pull that plug within that 10, let's say 10 or 15 milliseconds, it's going to automatically switch over to the built-in inverter running off of the batteries. Now, one thing I was kind of curious about was the jump start port, which they did not provide any cable to test this out, so I kind of sort of had to make my own cable. I do have a device that can test the cold crank amps on a battery, so I made my own cable, hooked everything up, and I was able to pull about 74 cold crank amps from this jump start port. The only reason why I did this is because other power stations that had a port like this just did not have the amperage in order to actually start a car. Now, I haven't tested this with a car, but the reason why the other ones didn't work is because anything over 10 or 15 amps just starts blowing things up. So it kind of seems to me like this jump start port with the cold crank amp capability of 74 amps might actually have the ability to jump start a car. And it runs at 13.3 volts. So not only is it a higher voltage than the standard DC port, but it can actually handle higher amperage, at least temporarily. Now, for convenience, on the top of the device, you do have a nice little cubby, so you can throw some of your cables in there, or use your manuals or phones or whatever it is that you want to store in there. It's just an easy way to kind of store things, have them out of sight, out of mind. Not that big a deal. But one thing I do like is the LED flashlight on the back of the device. The reason why I like it is because it's nice, it's bright, it has multiple different features, strobing, flashing. I mean, it's just one of those things that, in my experience, have been very useful, especially in a camping environment. When you want to light up a table or light up an area and you just want your battery there and you want people to be able to charge stuff and you have a light that's built into a power station, it just makes things really nice. Now, I really hate to give things glowing reviews and say that they're just absolutely perfect. So forgive me when I stretch just a little bit here and say maybe there's a few things that I would have liked to see different. First of all, the pure sine wave 110 volt outlet. A lot of power stations are doing the 120. A 120 volt output makes things like fans perform a lot better, or space heaters perform a lot better. Those resistive loads, having the higher voltage, allows them to perform better. So if I could change anything on this, it would have been nice to see that a 120 volt versus a 110. But that's just nitpicking. I mean, this thing performs so well, it's really hard to even, consider that a complaint. I will, however, take the opportunity to complain about the display. The display is about as basic as you can possibly get in any power station. It gives you very little information. It tells you what is going in and coming out of the power station, but it doesn't give you any estimated time to depletion, estimated time to charge. I mean, it just gives you the absolute bare minimum of information. I know LCD screens don't cost that much, and it just seems kind of like a weird oversight to not want to include some more basic information, like how much longer can you run said device before your battery goes dead, or how much longer is it going to take for my battery to be charged. These seem like some very obvious basic features that should be included in every LCD display screen, but for some reason, they left that out. But you know what? At the end of the day, like I said, recording this video, $799. That is an absolute ridiculous price for what this thing can do. The capacity, the output for $800 is just crazy. Now, if this is a sell and they start selling this for $1,299, okay, that's something to think about. Still a pretty good unit, still overperformed in every aspect that I tested, and it's probably still a pretty decent deal. But at $799, it almost makes me feel like it's a little too good to be true. Well, guys, I'm going to leave all the links in the description down below as always. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, make sure to post those down below. Thank you for watching, like and subscribe, and have yourself a great day.